Hi, I'm Jessie Skibbe. I'm the Vice President of Strategic Development and Chief Compliance Officer for Kirkpatrick Price. Thank you for joining me today. We really want to take you on a journey and describe to you what high trust compliance really means, starting off with who is high trust, what the CSF is, and how to apply it to your organization. So first, just a little bit about me. I have been in the role of Information Security Officer, Network Administrator, and Chief Compliance Officer, spanning my career of over 20 years across manufacturing, financial services, and healthcare industries. And in my current role, my primary objective is to help our clients achieve their security and compliance objectives. Many of our clients, being the business associate in a lot of cases, really has a multiple audit challenge that they have to deal with. And so a little bit about our firm. We have been practicing for over 12 years. We are a licensed CPA firm as well as a PCI QSA firm, and of course a high trust assessment firm. So we really have a wide variety of services to offer to help you meet your compliance objectives. So I'm going to start with giving you a background of who high trust is, not to be confused with the High Tech Act or HIPAA. High Trust is an independent organization. They are a not-for-profit organization. They were established in 2007, so they just celebrated their 10-year anniversary. And most recently, over the last 3 years, really gaining a lot of momentum with covered entities, hospitals, and payers really adopting their framework. A statistic I read on their website recently showed that 80% of hospitals and payers have both adopted the framework, making it the most widely used framework across the healthcare industry. So High Trust themselves, like I mentioned, is an independent organization. The board of directors behind High Trust is from companies such as Anthem, United Health Group, Walgreens, just to name a few. You can go to their website that we're going to show you here on screen. That will take you to the About Us. Obviously, it shows you, who the board of directors are, made up of healthcare industry professionals that are really kind of guiding and directing the initiative of High Trust. High Trust themselves, they are updating the CSF framework every year. The important thing about that, and what can really make you feel good about adopting the framework, is that they're paying attention to the cyber threat intelligence that's happening in the industry right now. They're paying attention to breach data. They are working closely with regulators to really create a comprehensive framework that will self-regulate and really provide due diligence with maintaining HIPAA compliance specifically across the healthcare industry. So it's something that you can really feel good about implementing, whether it is something that, your client really came to you and said, you have to do this, or whether it's something you're choosing on your own accord for a great level of due diligence. High Trust themselves really has committed to their users, to the people that have adopted the framework, that they will continue to update it year over year. So a little bit about who High Trust is. So now let's talk about what the CSF is. All right, so what is the CSF? The CSF, as I described, is really the common security framework. It's the core of what High Trust maintains for the healthcare industry. And I'm going to give you a lot of numbers to really kind of describe what the CSF is. And really important to note is that I described earlier how it was being widely adopted. 23,000 CSF assessments have been performed in the last few years. 10,000 of those in 2014. So there's really a push in this last 2 to 3 years of assessments being performed. And like I mentioned, I'm going to give you a lot of numbers to describe the CSF, those being a few. But to understand how it's the hierarchy works and how the CSF is constructed, it really follows, if you're familiar with ISO 27001, 27002, it follows that very closely. There are 14 control categories and containing 46 control objectives, mapping to 149 controls. Within each of those 149 controls, there's also up to 3 levels of implementation requirements that you have to meet based on the risk factors involved, which are organizational, system, and regulatory risk factors. And I'm going to explain a whole lot more specifically in the next video when I talk to you about how to use the CSF to apply it to your organization. So that, from a high level, is how the CSF is constructed. Important to note, too, is there are up to 845 requirement statements that you must be compliant with. Those are individual tests that must be performed when you're going through an evaluation. The good news is, however, I hope that number doesn't scare you off, because the HITRUST CSF is very scalable. Depending on the size of your organization, the number of records you're maintaining, the system that you have scoped out effectively, not all of those 845 requirement statements are going to apply to you. So my objective for this series of videos is to really walk you through how to determine what applies to you, what doesn't apply to you, and how you can really begin your path in maintaining HITRUST compliance. Okay, so I described from a 10,000 foot level what the Common Security Framework is. But I wanted to just give you some peace of mind, because you may be wondering, why do I need this? Why is my client asking me to be compliant with one more framework? Why should you have to go through all of this trouble? Well, if you're maintaining healthcare data, it's really important for you from a business standpoint for protecting yourself from risk, as well as maintaining that strong relationship with your client that's also trying to mitigate their risks. If you're not really sure what risks apply to you, then I would highly suggest a visit to the HHS newsroom. Most recently, I read about a $5.5 million resolution agreement with the hospital system. It's not only affecting covered entities, there are OCR resolution agreements going into place with business associates. So that's one reason. Obviously, the OCR is really gaining momentum with the audits and with the resolution agreements they're putting into place now for companies that are not maintaining compliance with HIPAA. But also from a financial perspective, thinking about potentially providing breach notification to all those consumers that you have in your database, really protecting yourself from a data breach is the right thing to do from a business standpoint, from a reputational risk standpoint, and to really maintain that strong relationship with your client, the covered entity, the hospital network. Depending on what you're doing for them as a business associate, it's really necessary to show them, to demonstrate to them that you are doing the right things and you're the right due diligence and maintaining compliance with HIPAA. So the CSF really does wrap itself beautifully around the HIPAA security rule. There are elements of privacy that I'll talk a little bit about later, but it's primarily the security rule. So if for no other reason, really, like I said, going to that HHS newsroom and just reading about some of the risks that apply to you as a business associate, as well as the covered entities as far as your responsibility of maintaining protection over that data. So following something like the HITRUST CSF really demonstrates a high level of due diligence that you are doing everything that you can, to protect that healthcare related data that you are held responsible for keeping secure. So we all know, HIPAA has been around for a very long time. 1986, and then in 2009, the HITECH Act, really brought some enforcement to that, but as well as to business associates. But really, HIPAA provides a basic guideline for entities to follow, but it really doesn't get into that granularity, as far as how necessarily to maintain some of those controls. So the one thing that HITRUST does very effectively is, like I said, it's very scalable depending on what your inherent risk factors are. If you are, areas that are in greater risk, you have to have a greater level of control. So it's very scalable from that aspect to adapt to your organization, depending on if you are smaller or on the larger side. So we've displayed a graphic here for you to kind of demonstrate some of the other frameworks that are included in the HITRUST framework. And as you'll see at the core, it's really built on ISO 27001, 27002 standard. That really being the international standard for information security and maintaining a management system that incorporates a risk management framework, really fits nicely with the scalability of the HITRUST CSF framework. So built on ISO, incorporating elements from PCI. As you'll see, not all of PCI is covered, but we're estimating about 80% of PCI is covered within the framework. You'll also see NIST 800-53, as well as a portion of COBIT. So the one nice thing that helps you gain efficiency within your compliance efforts is you may have clients that are asking you for a lot of different types of compliance. They're asking you to be compliant with NIST, for example, if you're doing any work and you have to be compliant with FSMA. If you are, for example, if you're also a vendor to someone and you're collecting credit card information or you're processing credit card numbers yourself, you'll know that that crossover between the CSF and PCI exists. So the HITRUST CSF framework can increase efficiency and reduce cost for your organization. So that's another reason why the framework was developed. So as I was saying, the HITRUST CSF really aligns itself nicely with other frameworks that you may already have to be compliant with. And one thing I really wanted to stress too is it's a certifiable framework, which makes it really nice and really attractive from the covered entity standpoint that you can achieve HITRUST certified, and they know that what that really means. They know that the scalability, they know the requirement statements, they know the controls that are requested in the CSF, and it's a really good way to measure and mitigate and control risk from the covered entity standpoint. So in our next video, I'm really going to drill down with you. Like I mentioned, there's 845 requirement statements. In our next video, I'm going to take you through how to determine what the scope of your environment is, and then how to apply that scope to really navigating the CSF and to start to apply those controls to your environment. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really hope it was a valuable use of your time, and we definitely hope to see you in the next video. As always, you can contact us immediately at the information below. We really hope to be your trusted partner in meeting your compliance objectives.